Welcome to Zonk. I, 25 female, had a nice job, a wonderful boyfriend, 28, who loved me to the moon, and a dog. My life was good until I stumbled upon a classmate from high school at a store opening in my neighborhood. After we exchanged pleasantries, she told me my archenemy was back in town. All my classmates in high school knew how much I hated Sam, 25 male. He always called me fat and ugly, and although he was right, it hurt me. I was a late bloomer. It took ages before I finally grew from a chubby and ugly teenager to a beautiful damsel that everyone admired. By then, he had left the town and no one knew how to get him. I excitedly collected his number. Later, I called him, and after I introduced myself, he started with his usual taunts. I told him I was no longer the girl he knew. Then I challenged him to meet up with me and see if he could taunt me. I booked a hotel for privacy because I suspected he might scream from surprise when he saw me. When we met, I was glad I did. He did more than scream. I let him do as he wished because I enjoyed it. He was so attractive, chiseled chest, broad shoulders, muscular arms, and blue eyes. He was a real charmer. We ended up in bed, and when he asked if he would see me again, I gleefully said yes. We kept meeting over and over again. Sometimes we met at his house, sometimes at mine or a hotel. I loved his wild attitude, and soon began to wish he was my boyfriend. He knew I had a boyfriend, so I felt the knowledge was holding him back from asking me out officially. After about 3 months, I got a shock. My best friend found out he was engaged to a woman abroad. I didn't believe her because she was against our relationship. Instead, I confronted him and he admitted it was true. I threatened to out him to his fiancée. He apologized and promised to break things off with her if I did the same with my boyfriend. I didn't need any more push. The next day, I broke things up with my boyfriend. He was weeping like a baby as he begged me to rethink, but I told him I was done. I told him I was seeing someone else and wanted to focus on that person. He still begged me to reconsider, but I left. I was happy with Sam as my boyfriend, and we were having a great time. 6 months later, he left the state for a 2-week work trip, and that was the last time I heard from him. My best friend sent me a picture of him and his wife. He left me high and dry to marry his fiancée. I couldn't reach him because he blocked me everywhere. I cried my eyes out when my bestie saw how miserable I was. She helped me get his wife's Facebook handle. I texted her about my affair with her husband. A few hours later, she replied. She thanked me and told me it wouldn't repeat itself now they're married. I've never been so heartbroken in my life. I feel like I've died. This is a nightmare. Where do I go from here? After 6 months, I finally got the courage to visit my ex-boyfriend. The one I left for Sam. Every time I called him, it would go to voicemail, so I showed up at his house unexpectedly. When the door opened, a strange woman was there. Before I could introduce myself, my ex-boyfriend came out. He introduced her as his girlfriend and told me how grateful he was for breaking up with her because he met his true love. I begged him to take me back. It was me he loved. I did all I could. I even ragged, but she threatened to call the cops on me. I left tearfully, and I haven't stopped crying since then. I feel like I made an everlasting mistake by breaking up with him. How do I right this wrong? Actions and consequences, OP. I don't feel sorry for you. You brought this upon yourself by being a shitbag of a human being. Both guys ultimately found love, and look who's alone and miserable now. Maybe next time you spring to bed with a guy, think of the possible consequences for you and for others as well. That'll keep you from a recurrence of this. Story 2. Here's the story. I broke up with my boyfriend 2 nights ago. We had been together for almost 2 years. We're both in our early 20s. I don't think I'll get over it anytime soon. I had cheated on him 3 weeks prior, and the night I broke up with him, I had prepared myself for all kinds of reactions, but the one he gave me. We're both pursuing studies abroad this year, and before we went abroad, we had several issues in our relationship that went unfixed. We are poor communicators when it comes to dealing with problems such as insecurity, neglect emotionally and sexually, and his depressive state of mind. Often, he would sulk or become depressed and unresponsive whenever I wanted or tried to talk about how I felt. And I tried really hard to make him understand why I was angry or upset. I told him we needed a break during our year apart, but he wanted to try to stay together and have a long-distance relationship. I relented. I wanted things to work out, so I agreed, which I now wish that he had seen things my way. For the first few months, it was okay. We talked weekly, but I felt like every time we talked, he was busy looking at Reddit, irony, playing computer games, etc., etc., doing everything but giving me his full attention, which is one of our major problems. I have never ever had his full and undivided attention. Only when he's sulking is he ever not being distracted by something else. I ended up cheating on him with some guy I met at a political event, and he was really interesting. I had no intention of sleeping with him, but I did eventually after one-on-one conversation, tea, music, and a massage. It didn't hit me until a week later that I had to tell my boyfriend, and I regretted it so much. I never wanted to hurt him like this. I realized that cheating is one of my deep-rooted psychological issues from a history of sexual abuse and being surrounded by family members and friends with similar issues, commitment issues, and sincere hatred for the opposite sex. I was no coward to telling him the truth. It was hard for me to say it, but I confessed. He was shockingly calm and did not blow up once throughout that night and the next day. I left him sometime in the afternoon by plane. He blamed himself for driving me to that point. He blamed himself for not listening to me when I asked and neglecting my needs. At that moment, I was so touched and full of guilt you wouldn't believe. I told him that it definitely wasn't his fault. I made a decision, a poor one, and I know that I broke the trust between us and we could no longer be together. He told me before he could never tolerate cheating. In the end, I ended it because it seemed he couldn't. Or rather, I told him we couldn't be together and we agreed in silence. I couldn't gather up the courage to break up with him before I cheated, though I knew that our relationship was turning sour on my end. I suppose that was cowardly of me in retrospect. I loved him, but my love wasn't what he needed. He had major self-confidence issues throughout our relationship. He's most definitely close to borderline depression, but not quite there, I think. I've seen clinical depression in my family. He was someone I thought I could fix, but I don't think I can. I still love him, have pictures of him on my wall, and all my connections to him are wide open. How do I cope? And should I have done things differently? I still can't believe I cheated. That was low of me. I invested so much in him. He messaged me the day after saying he can't believe how much he effed up and doesn't know what to do with himself. I replied to him telling him I still love him and care for him, but reminding him what has transpired and we need to deal with it. This is my first post on Reddit. He might read this. If he does, I wish him the best. Comments. It doesn't matter what you should have done, because you did things the way you did. You can't change the past, so don't sit around bemoaning it. What you can do is stop telling him that you love him. If you dumped him, telling him you still love him is like stabbing him with a knife after running him through with a sword. He already has self-esteem issues. She loves me, but not enough to remain faithful. I'm such an idiot for pushing her to this point. I hate myself so much. I'm such a loser. Leave the poor guy alone. You broke his heart, and now he has the idea that it's his own fault that you cheated on him. Let him move on in peace. Story 3. My boyfriend and I, both college age, have been dating over 2 years. I cheated on him with one of his best friends. After the fallout, my boyfriend and I got back together, but since we've gotten back together, I feel stifled, submissive, and dependent in our relationship, as he tries to reconcile things in his head and see if he can trust me again. He has access to all of my personal things, Skype, Facebook, phone, etc., and in addition, I've distanced myself from some of my friends whom he doesn't approve of. I don't know if we made a mistake by getting back together. I love him more than anything, but all I keep reading about is how couples can't recover from this. I feel like I need to do something to feel less powerless in our relationship as I bend over backwards to do everything I can to show him I'm not going to cheat on him again. I don't want anyone but him. I've learned my lesson. I don't know what to do to make myself feel like I have control over our relationship without compromising his trust again. Any advice? I would examine the root cause behind your initial act of cheating, as it's merely a symptom rather than the underlying issue in a troubled relationship. Without addressing the underlying cause, it's unlikely that your relationship will be able to heal. I've witnessed numerous relationships successfully navigate through infidelity, but it requires significant effort and accountability from both partners. Therefore, your significant other must reflect on their role in the deterioration of your relationship that ultimately led to your decision to cheat. Comments. You cheated. That's what happens when you cheat. If you want to stay with the person that you cheated on, you give up a lot of your privacy until they can find it in them to trust you again. You may be stifled, but those are the consequences that come from doing something to betray someone else. They will not trust you. And you should know that it probably crushed him. He has a big pile to crawl out of. If you really love him as you claim, you should embrace him trying to forgive you and drink a big cup of STFU. You don't have control over the relationship. No one should have control over the relationship. One thing you need to do is stop worrying about what everyone else is saying about cheating and cheaters. You know the truth. And if you're sure you aren't going to cheat anymore, then just work on having the best relationship you can. If you can't be sure you're going to be faithful, you might want to get out of your current relationship before you hurt him again. You do have to let him do what he needs to do to trust you again if you're going to stay with him. But if he uses that to control you and make you feel guilty, he may never forgive or trust you and he'll become abusive. As long as he's not bringing up your cheating and putting you down, then I say just give him some time. It will take a while, but it can be done.